Devil Venerable also wants to know. Chapter 18, Elder Qing. The blood arts were lost techniques because of the fact that very few people succeeded in practicing them, and even fewer people in the cultivation world knew of the blood severing technique. However, Yin Hanjiang had been following Wenren for many years and was there when Wenren obtained the manual for the blood arts. Therefore, he had some understanding of it. Forget about the agony that the blood severing technique caused to oneself, or how difficult it was to succeed in it. The most important fact was that 10,000 years ago, the only blood cultivator in the world went mad and became a true demon. It required the combined forces of the righteous and demonic sects to slay him. True demon had nothing to do about the distinction between righteous and demonic cultivators in the cultivation world. If the heavens were an elder, a cultivator was its junior. Righteous cultivators would go along with the heavens in order to cheat spiritual energy out of it. They used their techniques to connect themselves to the heavens, trying to become one with the universe so that the spiritual energy of the natural world recognized them and allowed itself to be absorbed by them. Righteous cultivators were careful to obey the principles of heaven and to accumulate merits in order to harmonize with the universe. In order to fool the heavens, they must first fool themselves. Thus, they walked the path of cheating heaven. On the other hand, demonic cultivators were like brats who struck their elders and kicked their younger siblings. They directly stole spiritual energy from the universe, their methods greedy and quick, and was known as the path of robbing the heavens. The righteous cultivators had always disapproved of the demonic cultivators, not because of the differences in their ideology but because stealing was much faster than coaxing. While righteous cultivators spent much time and energy to obtain a tiny bit of spiritual energy from the universe, the demonic cultivators essentially stole most of the family inheritance. If a righteous and demonic cultivator cultivated in the same spiritually rich spot, more than 90% of the spiritual energy would be stolen by the demonic cultivator, leaving just some leftover scraps for the righteous cultivator. This was the origin of the conflict between the two sides. One was deceivers and the other was thieves, so there was no moral high ground for either of them to claim. The whole reason righteous sects found trouble with demonic sects was that they couldn't beat them in stealing. However, there were upsides to the righteous path's techniques. Since they harmonized with heaven, their tribulations were relatively easy to pass. The heavens were much lenient on them, letting them off after throwing a few lightning bolts their way. As for the demonic path, the more they stole, the harder the tribulations they faced would be. It was said that the immortal realm was full of righteous cultivators while demonic cultivators were very few, as they were more likely to die during their heavenly tribulations. However, the type of demon that the blood cultivator had become wasn't referring to the distinction between schools of cultivation, but the distinction between gods and demons, with demons being the collection of all the negative energy in the universe. When a cultivator underwent their tribulation, they could absorb the chi that came down from the immortal realm, transforming their own chi into immortal essence in order to ascend, but a blood cultivator wouldn't be able to transform his chi into immortal essence. They could absorb all kinds of energy in the world: spiritual chi, immortal chi, and even the primordial chaos of the divine realm, but it would all be transformed into blood chi within their body. A blood cultivator had no limits and could cultivate to the power of a golden immortal while still in the cultivator realm. But at the same time, they could never ascend to the immortal realm, and could never become an immortal, as they could not have immortal essence. None of the upper realms would welcome a blood cultivator, and if Wenren dared to go there, all the gods and Buddhas of heaven would join forces to destroy him. Aside from the sea of blood in the underworld, which was the entrance to the demonic realm, there was now no place in the world for Wenren. Once he was corrupted, the demonic nature would overtake his humanity, and he would become a monster only capable of transforming everything around him into blood and absorbing it. Back at the restaurant, Wenren didn't eat any of the meat because his body was now composed of blood mist fused with his soul. Alcohol was liquid and could be absorbed into his blood without any problems. As for other foods, unless he dissolved it into blood to be absorbed, they would fall out of his body as soon as he ate them, as his body no longer have the capability to retain solid food. He was unable to store the 7-killing halberd inside his body either, since his dantian no longer existed. At present, Wenrenhe's body was made of solidified blood mist. He was unable to use light flash anymore, though the fact was, a blood cultivator's light flash was the fastest in the cultivation world. But if he used it, he would expose himself to Yin Hanjiang. After he carried out the blood-severing technique, the only path left to Wenrenhe was to abandon his humanity and becoming a true demon, with ascension becoming a near impossibility. Venerable One. Yin Hanjiang clutched frantically at Wenrenhe's robes as he choked on his words and was unable to speak further. Wenrenhe picked Yin Hanjiang up with his now solidified hand and climbed back to the top of the cliff. He threw an arm around Yin Hanjiang, patted his back and said quietly, "Don't grieve for me. This Venerable One is still alive, is he not? And now that I've increased my power, I'm afraid that there might be no one in this world who can take me on." Between living now and dying of his injuries back in that cave, Wenrenhe had chosen to live. He hadn't wanted to tell Yin Hanjiang because he was worried Yin Hanjiang would obsess over it and beat himself up for being too weak to save his master. Wenrenhe didn't want to see that kind of self-blame. It was so meaningless. Yin Hanjiang understood Wenrenhe well. He clung to Wenrenhe's sleeve and made choked noises, but in the end, he did not cry. When he got himself under control, he let go of Wenrenhe's robe. He got down on one knee and said resolutely, "It is indeed as the Venerable One said. The ultimate victory is survival. This subordinate has pledged to follow the Venerable One for life, so this subordinate can only ask the Venerable One to take him along to the Sea of Blood." Very good. This is more like the child that this Venerable One raised. With a sweep of his sleeve, Wenrenhe lifted Yin Hanjiang to his feet. "You can follow me, but don't kneel to me. This Venerable One doesn't want to see you kneel." "Understood," Yin Hanjiang said. The glimpse of pain on his face had already been hidden away, and the hint of youthful vigor that he had shown over the last few days at the border town had also vanished. Yin Hanjiang was once again the expressionless left protector, dedicated to his master with no thoughts of his own. His pain hadn't vanished. He only forced it back, putting on his habitual mask to cover up his emotions. Wenrenhe saw that Yin Hanjiang had calmed down and assumed that he had been reassured. If he guided Yin Hanjiang a bit now and again, then even if in the end he died like the book said, Yin Hanjiang hopefully wouldn't go insane. Neither of them brought up the blood arts again as they continued to search for the spiritual realm. In the end, aside from running into a horde of poison bats, they didn't manage to find anything after a month of searching. The strangest thing was that according to the book, Bailey Qing should have arrived at the Golden Coast Cliffs at this time. Yet, even after waiting for several days, they still saw no sign of her. After the end of the Great Sect War, Wenrenhe hadn't paid much attention to the events of the plot and hadn't been interested in looking into the righteous sect's affairs. All he knew was that Shu Yanyan had taken He Wenzao's nascent soul to break the spirit-severing array, leaving He Wenzao to fall from the sky. Who knew if he had survived? What if he had really died? Maybe Bailey King Miao's was so heartbroken and that was why she hadn't come to the Golden Coast. That was not acceptable, Wenrenhe thought. She could grieve all she wanted, but he needed the shattered mountain meteorite. He needed to forge a bonded weapon for Yin Hanjiang. It seems that the opening of this spiritual realm is also tied to Bailey Qingmiao, Wenrenhe said. We need to go pay a visit to Shangqing sect. Yin Hanjiang didn't say anything and only followed him in silence. It seemed like the life that had returned to him over the last few days had all been drained out of him. He forced himself not to think of anything, only trusting and following his Venerable One. If he allowed himself to think, his heart would hurt, and if he let his pain show, the Venerable One would be disappointed in his weakness. The Venerable One wanted him to become a strong and self-reliant sword cultivator, so he could not show him any sign of weakness. This Venerable One will ride with you again, said Wenrenhe. I can't let others see my light flash at this point. Yin Hanjiang commanded his sword to fly for a day and night, until the two of them arrived at a deserted area near Shangqing sect. To hide their identities, they changed their appearances slightly and entered the small town at the foot of the mountain. The people living and working at the foot of the mountain were all ordinary people. However, since they were situated close to the Shangqing sect but was outside its protective barrier, they were vulnerable to threats from the sect's enemies. Therefore, the sect would send disciples to patrol the town daily. Shangqing sect's protective array was anchored to an immortal artifact. Even Wenren and Yin Hanjiang wouldn't be able to get in by normal means. However, as a blood cultivator, Wenren had many more options open to him. They found a new batch of patrolling disciples that had just arrived, a group of Qi gathering stage disciples being led by a girl at the core formation stage. Wenren said quietly to Yin Hanjiang, "Protector Yin, wait for me here. I'll get Bailey Qingmiao off the mountain." Seeing Yin Hanjiang ascend, Wenren transformed into a streak of crimson light and entered the body of the leader. If he had his choice, even he wouldn't have preferred to take a woman's body, but the outer disciples of Shangqing sect lived outside its wards and had no opportunity to come into contact with Bailey Qingmiao. The only one Wenren could choose was the core formation stage female cultivator. A blood cultivator's soul was fused with their blood and could enter someone's body and meld with their bloodstream without leaving any trace. The body he was in would act like a shield for him, and even an immortal may not be able to discover him. The girl paused in her stride and stood for a moment with a hand on her head. Her previously soft and anxious gaze instantly became steely. Her consciousness had already been suppressed by Wenren, and she seemed like a completely different person. Wenren could kill her with less effort than raising a finger, but he wasn't interested in harming those weaker than him. He only temporarily suppressed her awareness and put her in an unconscious state. "Lushija, are you feeling unwell?" asked one of the disciples following her, who rushed forward after seeing her steps faltered. No, Wenren didn't know this girl's personality, so the less he said, the better. He was fully capable of using a soul-delving technique to read all the memories of this disciple from her soul, so as to prevent himself from slipping up, but that would lead to the certain death of the victim. Wenren only wanted to take Bailey Qingmiao away from her sect, and had no wish to cause further complications. A female outer disciple in a grey robe said with concern, "Lushija, are you thinking of He Shixian? There's no need to worry. The elders are incredible. They will surely come up with a way to save He Shixian." "No," Wenren said. He had no interest in patrolling and continued, "We're returning." After taking a few steps, he paused and turned to that outer disciple. "Which Shixian did you just mention?" "He Shixian," she replied. "Lushija, you look pale. When we get back, you should go to the administration hall and request some calming drugs, so you don't make yourself ill from anxiety." "He Shixian? Was there another person surnamed He in Shangqing sect?" Unimportant characters in abusive love affair, hadn't he been given names, but of the named disciples, He Wenzhao had been the only one with that surname. Also, what did this disciple just call him? Lushija. There indeed had been a named female disciple of Shangqing sect in the book, Lu Xinyi, the very female cultivator who secretly had feelings for He Wenzhao and forced herself upon him when he was injured, having her foundation drained in order to replenish his essence. She was also the villain who disguised herself as Bailey Qingmiao and got refined into an everlasting lamp by Yin Hanjiang. Seeing as she once, no, more like someday would become an everlasting lamp for him, and now Wenren was possessing her body, perhaps their fates were connected in some slight way. This wasn't a body that suited him very well, but he was only trying to find Bailey Qingmiao, and anyone would do for that purpose. Lu Xinyi had a high position within the sect and could easily reach Bailey Qingmiao. It was just a simple errand. He should be in and back in no time. Wenren could still remember how Lu Xinyi was described in the book. She was a two-faced person who was warm and considerate in front of He Wenzhao but became quite condescending when with the outer disciples. That sort of temperament wouldn't be hard to imitate. With a cold expression, he raised his voice. As an outer disciple, is it your place to tell me what to do? Lu Xinyi was highly respected amongst the outer disciples. In the face of her anger, the disciples with her were too scared to say anything more and followed Wenren He back up the mountain. Wenren He only knew Shangqing sect from its general descriptions in the novel, and had no knowledge of its specific layout. Fortunately, the compound was constructed with careful attention to feng shui. With a little calculation, he could figure out which area was most suited for housing the outer or inner disciples, and which area was most suited for the administration hall. He quickly led the disciples there, and in the day's patrol records, he mimicked Lu Xinyi's handwriting from previous days and wrote nothing out of the ordinary down. The outer disciples used the hall's jade slips to record their day's patrol tasks. They would earn a few contribution points this way, and if they saved enough, they could use them to buy elixirs. After they left, Wenren He first searched through the record of disciples who were currently out of the sect and didn't find Bailey King Miao's name in it. After determining the location of the inner disciples' quarters, he was about to go look for her, when he heard a completely plain and ordinary-looking core formation disciple called to him, "Lu Shimei, haven't you been concerned for He Shixian? I'm looking after him tonight, so you can come and see him." After saying that, he winked, as if to say, "Look how considerate I am, giving you a chance to get close to He Wenzhao." Having memorized the abusive love affair, from cover to cover, he was very familiar with these words. The plotline they led to was the one where Lu Xinyi took the opportunity while caring for He Wenzhao at night to give herself to him and help him recover his nascent soul. "I'm not going," Wenren He replied bluntly. It was no concern of Wenren He whether He Wenzhao lived or died. He was only here to find Bailey Qingmiao, and after he got Bailey Qingmiao away, Lu Xinyi could find her own opportunity to sleep with He Wenzhao. The disciple who had fulfilled the role of a pimp in the story was shocked speechless at Wenren He's words, as he saw Lu Xinyi turned away carelessly with no regard to He Wenzhao's well-being at all. "No way, Shimei," he said. "Didn't you like Shixian?" Wenren He could not afford to attract suspicions, thus he turned around and said with much annoyance, "When he was at nascent soul, of course this I liked him, but now that he's useless, why should I waste my time on him?" The other disciple was speechless. The cold-hearted Lu Xinyi finally got away from the nameless disciple, and headed directly for the inner disciples' quarters. Wenren He was puzzled by something. If He Wenzhao had been saved by the rescue teams and brought back to the sect, and this time around Bailey Qingmiao hadn't used the flesh mushroom on Wenren He, shouldn't she have set out to find it for He Wenzhao? Yet she hadn't searched for the mushroom for him and hadn't gone to the Golden Coast Cliffs to get the meteorite for him. What was she doing in the sect? With this question in mind, Wenren He hurried towards the compound where the inner disciples lived and cultivated. Sword flight was forbidden within the sect's grounds, so he had no choice but to walk. After some time, he got to the quarters for core formation female disciples, and yet didn't know which room Bailey Qingmiao was in. He saw a plain and ordinary female disciple pass by. He could tell at a glance that this was a character in the book whose position was far below Lu Xinyi's, so he grabbed hold of her and asked, "Where's Bailey Qingmiao?" His tone was harsh, but fortunately Lu Xinyi often didn't treat other disciples very nicely, and her attitude got worse whenever she talked about Bailey Qingmiao. The passerby replied, "Bailey Shimei, no, now that she's a nascent soul stage, she should be a Shija. Bailey Shija is in seclusion on Dustless Peak with Elder King Xue." Nascent soul? Wenren He furrowed his brows. When had Bailey Qingmiao reached nascent soul? This didn't match the novel's events. And who was Elder King Xue? They had never appeared in the book. After releasing the disciple, Wenren He found a deserted spot and accessed his Qingqin sleeves to retrieve the abusive love affair novel, wanting to double-check when Bailey Qingmiao had reached nascent soul in the story. However, when he opened the first page, he found that the first line of text had changed. "Plot holes have been partially fixed." Please continue your efforts. Wenren he hadn't opened the book in 11 years and never imagined the contents could be changed. He hurriedly flipped it open and carefully scanned it, looking for the alterations. Abusive love affair was still from Bailey King Miao's perspective, but the story had changed from the 1,000-mile ice plains onwards to perfectly match the real events that Wenren he knew to have happened this time. He read up to the Great Sect War and learned that Bailey King Miao had rescued a skeletal person in black robes. Wenren he. The rescued black-robed person turned out to be a domineering woman and a wandering immortal who followed Bailey Qing Miao back to Shangqing sect. The Shangqing sect leader was heavily injured and unconscious following his battle with Wenren he, which was in line with what was in the original story, with several wandering immortals affiliated with the sect had been killed, so the sect was desperately in need of support. They quickly admitted this wandering immortal overflowing with immortal essence, who was clearly at a glance not any sort of demonic cultivator. That wandering immortal took the new name of Elder Qingxiu. After helping Elder Qingxiu settled in, Bailey Qing Miao went looking for her Shixing and found that he Wenzhao had his nascent soul taken by a heartless demonic cultivator. Instantly forgetting the reasons for her previous quarrel with him, she threw her arms around him and started sobbing. He Wenzhao slowly opened his eyes and, seeing his beloved, spoke in a heartbroken tone, "Shimei, when I was hurt, all I thought of was seeing you once more time. But where were you then?" Bailey Qing Miao cried so hard that she could hardly breathe. She was about to blame herself when she heard a cold voice beside her say, "She went to find the flesh mushroom to save me. Do you have a problem with that?" Elder Qingxiu's cold gaze swept over He Wenzhao. "The flesh mushroom certainly could have restored you, but if you compare a wandering immortal side by side with a disciple who has lost his nascent soul, everyone knows which one ought to be saved. Can you possibly bring greater benefit to the Shangqing sect compared to me? Where do you get the audacity to ask Bailey Qing Miao to save you?" He Wenzhao was so angry that he could spit blood. Clutching Bailey Qing Miao's hand, he forced out, "Shimei, I never said anything like that." "Wah, I know," Bailey Qing Miao sobbed. She wanted to hug He Wenzhao but was picked up in one hand by Elder Qingxiu. "At your level, even if you want to save someone, you have to consider whether you actually have the ability to," said Elder Qingxiu. "Hurry up and take me as a mentor, and after you improve your cultivation, you can worry about saving other people." But I already have a Shifu," Bailey Qing Miao replied awkwardly. "It doesn't matter," said Elder Qingxiu. "I can just take your Shifu as an honorary disciple. I'm not worried about the distinction between being your Shifu or your Shifu's Shifu." Bailey Qing Miao. Wenren he. End chapter. Devil Venerable also wants to know. Chapter 19, A Thoughtful Subordinate. Bailey King Miao's Shifu, Elder Qing Rong, may have only been at deity transformation stage, but she was of the same generation as Elder Qingxiu. After hearing that the wandering immortal wanted to take her as disciple, she hesitated for a moment, and after some thought, she said, "At this moment, the most senior members of the Shangqing sect are the sect master and myself. If I were to become the nominal disciple of Elder Qingxiu, you would become the sect master's martial sister. I don't have the authority to do something like that." Actually, Qingxiu being a wandering immortal meant she was entirely qualified to be considered senior to Elder Qing Rong and the sect master. But she was a mere guest at Shangqing sect, so it could not be allowed for an outsider to stand in a more senior position than the sect master. Qingxiu's expression twisted and she started using her few remaining brain cells to weigh the possibility of getting rid of Elder Qing Rong. Fortunately, Elder Qing Rong patted Bailey Qing Miao on the head and said, "And I know Elder Qingxiu does not actually wish to take me as disciple but was only impressed by King Miao's talent and unable to pass her up. Qing Miao, it is your great fortune that Elder Qingxiu wishes to impart her teachings to you, so there is no need to reject it. It would be awkward if she wanted you to become her sworn disciple, but as a nominal disciple, there's no problem." "That's fine," said Qingxiu. Thus, Bailey Qingmiao entered seclusion with Elder Qingxiu and rapidly reached nascent soul stage, becoming the rising star of Shangqing sect's next generation. She wanted to visit her Shikshan too, but Elder Qingxiu was much more powerful than her and had set up a barrier around their cultivation grounds, telling Bailey Qingmiao that she wasn't allowed to leave until she could break it with her own power. For the sake of seeing her Shikshan, Bailey Qingmiao dedicated herself to cultivating and made progress at breakneck speed, absorbing techniques and teachings like a sponge. Wenren he flipped a few more pages and found that the rest of the story was still identical to the original, with the two halves of the story not matching up. The last page had gained several more reviews, however. Extra, the legendary trash novel writer has returned from the dead, and started a revision. Me before reading the revision, can this brain-dead story actually be revised? Probably just fixing typos. Me after reading the revision, good shit. Elder Qingxiu is so badass. Between a wandering immortal and a disciple who has lost his nascent soul, everyone knows who deserves to be saved. Where do you get the nerve to compare yourself to me? That line killed me, ha ha ha. Don't you guys think this Elder Qingxiu's appearance is too sudden? The MC originally should have saved the devil Venerable, but instead Wenren he got an earlier debut, and without a debt to the MC, he didn't care if she lived or died. Instead, Elder Qingxiu took his place and started putting down the male lead for her. I suspect that Elder Qingxiu is a man in disguise. Look at her description, she's half a head taller than Bailey Qingmiao. Seems suspicious to me. After seeing the above post, I suddenly want to see Elder Qingxiu take off her clothes to be revealed to be bigger than the male lead, haha. Don't be so hopeful, you guys. Back when the MC saved Qingxiu, she saw her body and she was definitely a woman. And besides, worst case the author could be setting up a storyline where the ML takes Qingxiu into his harem, Qingxiu and the MC become rivals, mentor and disciple turn on each other, and the author can torture the female lead even worse. Well, from what we have so far, the revised story is pretty decent. I'll wait and see. Asterisk. It seemed the changes made in this world would be reflected in the novel in the form of revisions. And the viewpoint was very limited, only focusing on Bailey Qingmiao. Bailey Qingmiao knew nothing about Wenren he's blood cultivation or Yin Hanjiang reaching void boundary stage, so the book said nothing about it. It indeed seemed that reality was not set in stone. The world he lived in might appear to be a novel, but it did truly have its own existence. Each and every character, through their own thoughts and actions, could change the thoughts and actions of those in a higher plane. After Wenren he obtained abusive love affair, and started changing the plot, the author in a higher plane had probably decided to start revising the story out of the blue one day, inspiration flooding through their mind, and rewrote the first half to match the developments up to now. The author would think it was their own ideas, but actually, it was a matter of different worlds influencing each other. Having figured out things at this point, Wenren he became more confident that as long as the people in this world acted rationally and in befitting ways, the story, which was to say, the destiny, could be changed. He found the exact location of Bailey Qingmiao's seclusion in the book, and after putting the book away, he hurried over to Qingxiu's cultivation grounds. Though they couldn't fly within the bounds of the sect, they could ride flying boats to get from place to place, so Wenren he drove one to Frost Peak. Shangqing sect greatly respected this Elder Qingxiu and gave her the entire Frost Peak as a cultivation ground. She was being treated pretty good that it made Wenren he became a little depressed. After arriving at Frost Peak, Wenren he disembarked and was immediately stopped by a barrier. It was Qingxiu's array to prevent people from entering or even seeing inside. However, a mere array was no obstacle to Wenren he. Even if he couldn't unleash the blood arts within Shangqing sect's territory, he was highly skilled in arrays. He quickly found a weak spot and used Lu Xinyi's power to open an entrance barely big enough for one person, strode in and went inside. A moment after, the opening automatically sealed behind him. Who dares? A tall woman in the robes of Qing sect appeared in the air, glaring down at Wenren. "It is indeed you," Wenren said lightly upon seeing her familiar face. While reading the book, it was not hard at all for him to surmise that Elder Qingxiu was actually Qingxiu. "Who are you?" Qingxiu drifted down, continuing to look down at Lu Xinyi from her full height. Lu Xinyi, standing with an aura of unruffled calm with hands behind her back as she said with a dignified air, "Hall Master Qiu of Xianyuan sect, if you wish to infiltrate the righteous sects, shouldn't you at least remember the faces and names of each disciple in that sect first?" Qingxiu was at the very least an expert of the demonic sects. Even if she didn't have much intellect, she was very experienced. After scrutinizing Lu Xinyi for a moment, she said, "You must be a demonic cultivator, using the soul control technique or some other secret art to control this disciple." Wenren didn't really have much to say to this subordinate of his, and after exposing her identity, he continued with, "Whatever you plan to do at Qing sect does not matter to this Venerable One. This Venerable One only cares that you not do anything to Bailey Qingmiao, as I have plans for her." "This Venerable One? Wenren Qingxiu exclaimed in shock. She initially took several steps back out of caution, then stood her ground and said, "This is the Qing sect's territory, protected by an immortal artifact. Even you would be suppressed by its power. Since you borrowed this disciple's body to infiltrate, you'll be unable to exert your full strength. If I kill off this disciple and activate the sect's array against you, you're sure to sustain a heavy blow." After speaking, she struck without hesitation at Lu Xinyi's chest, showing no regard for the disciple's life. Wenren smiled lightly. The Xianyuan sect was still as he knew it, a group of cold-hearted snakes who would betray anyone for their own ambitions. After a glance at the array surrounding the mountain peak, he gathered blood mist around his body and in a flash of crimson light, severed one of Qingxiu's arms. It slowly dissipated into blood vapor, while the remainder of her arm began to dissolve as well. Qingxiu acted decisively and took out a large blade to sever her right arm from the shoulder, managing to stop the progress of the blood mist. "The blood arts, you've actually used the blood severing technique," Qingxiu said in alarm. "So, you're not controlling this disciple from afar, you're here in person." Her eyes darted back and forth as she formulated an idea. With a quick move, she was about to open the barrier around the mountain peak. "You're thinking of opening the barrier and turning the main array of Qing sect against this Venerable One," Wenren said. "A blood cultivator would be the enemy of the entire cultivation world. If one was discovered in Qing sect, all of the righteous sects would mobilize to kill him." Qingxiu was not deterred by Wenren seeing through her plan and was about to open the barrier anyway when Lu Xinyi made a move toward her. A hand made from blood vapor pierced through her chest. Qingxiu had just become a wandering immortal and was not yet familiar with using her immortal qi. She instantly sustained heavy injuries from that one attack. "Hall Master Qiu, before you open the barrier, this Venerable One can take your body, dissolve your soul, and make all of your immortal qi his own," Lu Xinyi said darkly. "It's up to you whether you still want to open the barrier or not." Qingxiu wiped the blood that had dripped down her chin and said with difficulty, "Venerable One, this subordinate belongs to Xianyuan sect as a wandering immortal in life and a ghost cultivator in death. I swear absolute loyalty to the Venerable One." "That's better." Wenren withdrew his hand and the blood mist vanished back into Lu Xinyi's body. "Deal with your own wounds," he said coldly. "As a wandering immortal, these flesh injuries should be nothing to you. This subordinate is grateful to the Venerable One for his mercy," Qingxiu said. "This subordinate is fine." Even as she spoke, the gaping hole in her chest grew in size, but she stubbornly acted as if it didn't bother her. "This Venerable One subordinates certainly are talented," Lu Xinyi said with a cold sneer. Qingxiu disregarded the scorn and quickly took a healing elixir. She was an experienced demonic cultivator and no one among her station would say empty words without the strength to back them up. One could only make it in the world by understanding which way the wind blew. After much difficulty, she managed to fix her arm and the hole in her chest and got down on one knee, bowing her head and no longer daring to look down on Lu Xinyi. Even if the Venerable One was in a shorter body than hers, a subordinate could not make their master look up at them. "You don't need to be concerned," said Wenren He. "You can stay at Shangqing sect as a sect elder. I see that you're doing very well for yourself. However, I have a need of Bailey Qingmiao today for a minor errand. Make an excuse that you're taking her to gain experience and bring her down the mountain." This subordinate understands. After some hesitation, Qiu Kongxiu said, "Venerable One, as Bailey Qingmiao is your favored disciple, it's improper for this subordinate to take her in. How about this subordinate slaughters the Shangqing sect and leaves her without a home? If your excellency helps her, then she'll naturally accept you as her shifu." Wenren He. Although he was the devil venerable, the way his subordinate's brain worked always managed to surprise him. "That isn't necessary. This venerable is indeed impressed by her aptitudes, but I have no need to take her in as a disciple. I just wish for her to become sufficiently powerful." He didn't bother explaining why. In any case, his subordinates always came up with reasons for him. "Indeed," Qiu Kongxiu said, "I see, the Venerable One wishes to train a worthy opponent in order to raise his own cultivation stage. This subordinate understands and will make sure to raise Bailey Qingmiao well." As long as you understand," Wenren He said. As they were conversing, a figure emerged from the cultivation chamber and descended before Qiu Kongxiu, saying, "Master, this disciple has already learned the principles of array formation and has come to test the barrier." It was indeed Bailey Qingmiao, and only after reporting to Qiu Kongxiu did she turn around to see the person with her master. Upon seeing it was Lu Xinyi, her expression visibly stiffened. Lu Xinyi wasn't a fan of Bailey Qingmiao, and Bailey Qingmiao was not a people pleaser. Since Lu Xinyi also liked her Shikshan, she had always resented her. After shrinking behind Qiu Kongxiu's back, she poked out her head and said, "Shifu, are you also going to take in Lu Xinyi as a nominal disciple?" Master, why are you squatting?" Qiu Kongxiu couldn't let Bailey Qingmiao see her kneeling, but she also didn't dare to stand taller than Wenren He, so she could only half squat on the ground, completely disregarding how improper it looked. "This is the horse stance," Qiu Kongxiu explained. "Even if we cultivators have great spiritual powers, we can't neglect our physical prowess. That way, we can be prepared for any situation." "I see," said Bailey Qingmiao, nodding. "Thank you for the instruction." Upon noticing Wenren He's gaze on her, Qiu Kongxiu immediately said, "Bailey Qingmiao, you can exit seclusion. You're going on a trip to the Golden Coast Cliffs." "Really?" Bailey Qingmiao said cheerfully. After fiddling with her fingers, she asked, "Then, can I go visit Shikshan before I go?" End chapter. Devil Venerable also wants to know. Chapter 20, Blood Demon Elder. Bailey Qingmiao hugged Qiu Kongxiu's arm and shot a look at Lu Xinyi. Though she was being subtle, her provocative intent was clear to see. Wenren He. If anyone dared to look at him that way in Xianyuan sect, they would probably never be able to look at anything again for the rest of their life. Wenren He would have dug out those eyes and hung them in Xianyuan sect's main hall so they could stare at him all they wanted. Bailey Qingmiao was blatant enough that even Qiu Kongxiu noticed. She instinctively gauged Wenren He's reaction, and seeing that he looked displeased, she immediately stretched out a hand to cover Bailey Qingmiao's eyes. Completely oblivious to the danger she was in, Bailey Qingmiao lowered her head and buried it towards Qiu Kongxiu's chest. "Master Kongxiu, I really miss Shikshan, please," she begged. "You can go see him. Seeing as you won't have a chance in the future, right?" Qiu Kongxiu said pleasantly, pulling her back and looking at her large, sparkling eyes. That last question was directed at Wenren He, probably asking him for mercy on behalf of Bailey Qingmiao, to let her see the one who was most important to her before she was blinded forever. It could also be considered one last favor from master to disciple. Wenren he looked at Qiu Kongxiu coldly and said, "There's no need." Though she had been spared, Bailey Qingmiao was still unaware of having been in any danger. She hid behind Qiu Kongxiu's back again and said, "Lushija, Elder Kingxiu has given me permission to go see Shixing. You don't have the authority to stop me. But this venerable one has the authority to stop Qiu Kongxiu from digging your eyes out," Wenren he thought. After hearing Wenren he's words, Qiu Kongxiu pleasantly patted Bailey Qingmiao's cheeks and said with a warm smile, "That's true. There's not much difference in you having those eyes or not." Huh. Bailey Qingmiao rubbed at her eyes and gave her master an odd look. Her eyes were fine. Qiu Kongxiu had inadvertently agreed to Bailey Qingmiao's request. As Lu Xinyi was just a core formation disciple, she couldn't refuse her elder's decisions. She silently followed them as Qiu Kongxiu opened the barrier array. Bailey Qingmiao shot her rival another smug look before boarding the flying boat. After she climbed on, she felt an odd sensation behind her and turned around to see Elder Kingxiu and Lu Xinyi both silently following her. "Why are you following me?" Bailey Qingmiao snapped at Lu Xinyi. Hearing her tone, Qiu Kongxiu took out a small knife and began twirling it at her fingertips, thinking if Bailey Qingmiao didn't want her tongue she could cut it out for her. It wasn't necessary for cultivation anyway. "This I also need to depart Frost Peak," Lu Xinyi said, while reaching out to push down Qiu Kongxiu's hand with the knife. Qiu Kongxiu, seeing that the Venerable didn't need her help, put away the knife. Unaware that she had narrowly avoided two disasters successively, Bailey Qingmiao grumbled to herself as she steered the boat. She'd never liked Lushija. Lushija bullied her before when she was still an outer disciple and always stole her contribution points, so that she couldn't earn manuals or foundation establishment elixirs at the administration hall. If it weren't for her Shixing's consideration, she might still be an ordinary Qi-gathering disciple. But now that she had Elder Kingxiu on her side, Lushija wouldn't dare do anything to her. It was also only with the backing of Elder Kingxiu that Bailey Qingmiao dared to show her resentment to Lu Xinyi. As Bailey Qingmiao steered the ship, Wenren he transmitted a message to Qiu Kongxiu behind her to ask, how did she overcome the heart demon tribulation at nascent soul stage? Bailey Qingmiao's core formation stage lightning tribulation had caused her newly gained awareness of the path of indifference to vanish, and Wenren he guessed that her nascent soul stage tribulation would be similar. Qiu Kongxiu answered, when she advanced to nascent soul stage, she saw He Wenchao having sex with Protector Shu, as well as the body currently possessed by the Venerable One, and other countless women whose faces could not be seen. At that time, she was in tears and almost unable to advance to nascent soul. Even her golden core almost dissipated. How did she overcome her inner demons? Wenren he asked. Qiu Kongxiu pulled a face. When she was on the brink of Qi deviation, she suddenly calmed down, completed the formation of her nascent soul, and the illusion completely vanished. When I asked her afterward, she told me that in the illusion, her Shixing smiled gently at her and said that he loved her the most in the world and everyone else was just passing fancy. At that, she instantly calmed down, as all that mattered was that his Shixing loving her. Wenren he had a growing suspicion that some sort of hidden power was interfering with Bailey Qingmiao's tribulations. In the original plot, the female lead gave up her divine status after she gained it and acted like she had been possessed with thoughts of Shixing wanted her to protect mortal lives. Was it something that had been forced on her? Qiu Kongxiu saw the grave expression on Wenren he's face and said considerately, Venerable One, I may be a wandering immortal now, but I still know some ghost cultivation tricks. Why don't I call a few spirits in, scoop out her brains and stuff a vengeful ghost who hates men in there? Wenren he glanced at his considerate subordinate who was trying to ease his burdens and replied, Hall Master Qiu, now that you've grown a brain again, you should see Protector Shu sometime and learn how to use it. Don't let it go to waste. Understood, Venerable One, Qiu Kongxiu said obediently. While they were communicating, Bailey Qingmiao had flown the boat to the main peak. After the sect master and his personal disciple were both injured, they were both housed in the sect master's quarters. Lushija, we're at the main peak, Bailey Qingmiao said rudely. You can leave now. Wenren he was already used to Bailey Qingmiao's attitude toward Lu Xinyi and paid her no mind as he followed her in silence. Why are you following me? Bailey Qingmiao asked furiously. If Lu Xinyi tailed her the whole way, how was she supposed to say her farewells to her Shikshan? I'm also going to meet He Wenzhao, Wenren he said. He wanted to personally see how He Wenzhao planned to balance the two women's demands and reassure both Bailey Qingmiao and Lu Xinyi at the same time. On the main peak, Bailey Qingmiao could not knock out Lu Xinyi to prevent her from visiting her Shikshan. She could only reluctantly take both Elder Qingxiu and Lu Xinyi to the place where He Wenzhao was recuperating. Upon entering the door and seeing He Wenzhao lying weakly on the bed, Bailey Qingmiao's tears started flowing. Shikshan, she sobbed. Shimei, He Wenzhao opened his eyes and gazed emotionally at Bailey Qingmiao, as well as Lu Xinyi standing behind him. And Lu Shimei. Bailey Qingmiao didn't care about Lu Xinyi and threw herself at He Wenzhao. Shikshan, did the medical hall elders say how your injuries are? He Wenzhao smiled bitterly and shook his head, reaching out to stroke Bailey Qingmiao's hair. Shimei, you've already reached nascent soul? You formed your nascent soul several years sooner than me. I can rest assured and leave the future of the sect to you. With difficulty, he wiped away Bailey Qingmiao's tears, saying softly, don't cry, Shimei. As a nascent soul stage core disciple and a future pillar of Shangqing sect, you need to be strong and act as an example to your juniors. He Wenzhao's words only made Bailey Qingmiao cry harder. The pillar of the sect was supposed to be He Wenzhao. Was Shikshan saying this because he had already given up and wanted to pass his duties onto her? Master Qingxiu. Bailey Qingmiao lifted her head and looked toward Qiu Kongxiu, tears staining her face. You told me that after I reached nascent soul, there would be a way for me to save Shikshan. How could I do it? Qiu Kongxiu said, well, after advancing to nascent soul stage, you can practice a secret technique that marks another person's soul. This makes it easier to find them after they reincarnate. I will teach you this technique. This way you can mark He Wenzhao and then kill him, then find his reincarnation and raise him until he grows up. For a cultivator, 18 years is just a blink of an eye. Bailey Qingmiao. He Wenzhao. Even Wenren he wanted to applaud Qiu Kongxiu. Xianyuan sect was certainly overflowing with talent these days. Bailey Qingmiao was speechless for a moment, then hugged He Wenzhao and started bawling. Shikshan. Hu. He Wenzhao embraced Bailey Qingmiao, but his eyes fell on Lu Xinyi. He really was good looking by nature and his tender eyes seemed to be able to speak to you. His warm gaze was telling Lu Xinyi, Shimei, I'm no longer even worth your love, so you don't need to come visit me again. The real Lu Xinyi would probably have offered her body on the spot. But Wenren he just looked at him coldly, and after watching him for some time, furrowed his brows slightly. While exchanging gazes with Lu Xinyi, He Wenzhao suddenly acted like he was listening to a voice, then abruptly paled, looking at Wenren he with alarm. He opened his mouth and was about to yell. Wenren he strode forward in a step and covered his mouth with one hand. He pulled Bailey Qingmiao off and said, you step away. Lu Xinyi. Seeing that Lu Xinyi had the audacity to physically pull her and Shikshan apart, Bailey Qingmiao was fuming but got dragged off by Elder Qingxiu. Master! Bailey Qingmiao cried in a mixture of fury and anxiety as she watched Elder Qingxiu seal the door with a wave of her sleeve. Elder Qingxiu grabbed her by the head and held her down. Shut up. The Venerable One's expression just now had said he was facing a dangerous enemy. Something was wrong with He Wenzhao. Qing set up a barrier around the room, preventing anyone outside from listening to the conversation between the two. Inside the room, Wenren he noticed Qing had taken the care to put up a barrier, and so he released He Wenzao's mouth and unleashed his spiritual awareness to thoroughly examine him. He Wenzao retreated to the opposite wall, his magic weapon in one hand and a transmission talisman in the other. If he snapped the jade tally, the experts of Shangqing sect would immediately arrive to help him, and activate the mountain's array to banish what was possessing Lu Xinyi. Wenren he glanced at the talisman and said, "You can call for backup, but this Venerable One won't help you hide your real identity." Without learning the blood arts, Wenren he would never have been able to notice that there were currently two souls inside He Wenzao's body. A wisp of blood chi hid inside him, the same blood art as Wenren he practiced. 10,000 years ago, the only blood cultivator in the world Qi deviated and became a demon, and was eliminated by the righteous sects and demonic sects joining forces. But a blood cultivator was the most difficult being to truly get rid of, as if a single drop of their blood remained, they could slowly recover their strength. "Who are you?" He Wenzao demanded. "Lu Shimei wasn't possessed when I saw her 7 days ago. What did you do to her?" "You aren't worthy to speak to this Venerable One," Wenren he said coldly. "Swap with the one inside you." He Wenzao's expression was unwilling, as his eyes flicked back and forth wildly and he seemed to be conversing with someone. In a moment, his expression shifted dramatically, from that of a sentimental and indecisive righteous disciple to a cruel and merciless blood cultivator. The blood demon spoke with He Wenzao's body. Over these 10,000 years of recuperating, this Venerable One never thought that another blood cultivator would appear in the cultivation world. This Venerable One must commend you for withstanding the blood-severing technique. The words "this Venerable One" rather grated on Wenren he's ears. He replied in the same haughty manner, "This Venerable One has never met another person worthy of calling themselves Venerable One." "Is that so? You have no idea how strong this Venerable One was in the past, and how much stronger cultivators were 10,000 years ago. The cultivators of this age are not even worth a mention." He Wenzao sneered. Wenren he didn't want to continue arguing with the blood demon. There wasn't a point in seeing who could make comebacks quicker. Cultivators certainly were stronger 10,000 years ago, but 10,000 years ago the world was filled with suffering as natural disasters were never ending, and humans made sacrifices to the gods but they cared not for humanity. If things continued down that path, the heavens would cleanse the human realm and eliminate all life, so that the earth could slowly recuperate and give rise to new sentient beings. Fortunately, one blood cultivator drew the focus of the entire cultivation world, and in the conflict that followed, countless cultivators died and allowed the human realm some period of recovery. This had been the great calamity of the cultivation world 10,000 years ago. You have possessed He Wenzao but haven't taken over his body. What's your goal? Does he know that you're a blood cultivator? Wenren he questioned. He knew that if the blood demon didn't want He Wenzao to hear their conversation, He Wenzao would naturally not hear a word. What do you think? This Venerable One advises you not touch He Wenzao. Otherwise, if the sex array is activated, we'll be like fish in a net and neither of us will get out alive. The blood demon spoke unconcernedly, knowing Wenren he wouldn't expose his identity. When did you possess him? After the Great Sect War. By Wenren he's calculations, the calamity of 10,000 years ago should not appear within the same 10,000 year period. It must have been the Great Sect War which awoke him from his slumber. And if the blood demon had been possessing He Wenzao while he was dual cultivating with Shu Yanyan, she probably wouldn't have got off unscathed. Since Shu Yanyan was perfectly fine and also managed to snatch He Wenzao's nascent soul, he must have encountered the blood demon after his nascent soul was stolen. Wenren he was puzzled by something in the book. Lu Xinyi gave herself to a righteous disciple, so why did she lose her golden core? The explanation given in the book was that He Wenzao was having chi deviation and wasn't in control of his actions. After recovering, he got over his inner demons and the Shang-Qing sect elders confirmed that he had returned to normal. It was awkward for them to investigate what He Wenzhou did while he was unaware, so they just viewed it as Lu Xinyi having brought trouble upon herself. Moreover, He Wenzhou showed every consideration to Lu Xinyi afterward, searching day and night for a way to restore her golden core. After reaching body unity stage, he even dual cultivated with Lu Xinyi, helping her regain her power and break through to nascent soul. Bailey Qingmiao and He Wenzhou had many fights over this. He married the master of Xiling Pavilion because he had to save the sect master's life and only the Xiling Pavilion had the cure. But what was the excuse for dual cultivating with Lu Xinyi so many times? Was dual cultivating the only way to restore her power? Wenren he had no interest in reading the male lead make excuses for himself. Bailey Qingmiao would always give in by the end anyway. The last time he met He Wenzhou, he didn't have any good impression of him. He only saw a man who was irresolute about his feelings and lusting after Xu Yanyan. But the He Wenzhou in the book, after losing his nascent soul, suddenly became much more shrewd, even managing to take a wandering immortal like the master of Xiling Pavilion into his harem. After meeting this blood demon possessing many thousands of years of experience, Wenren he felt that several illogical points in the book had now been explained. Had the He Wenzhou in the latter parts of the book already been replaced by the blood demon? After thinking it over, Wenren he decided he couldn't have been. Just that with the blood demon in his head, helping him plan his every step, He Wenzhou was slowly brainwashed and manipulated from a righteous disciple to someone who would use any means to achieve his goals. As a fellow blood cultivator, Wenren he guessed that the blood demon had probably taken an interest in the divine essence inside He Wenzhou and wanted to wait until after he had cultivated into a god, so that he could take over He Wenzhou's body and divinity in one fell swoop and become a devil god. The plot of abusive love affair was only up to when the main couple ascended together to the immortal realm and didn't get to their ascension to godhood. So He Wenzhou was still himself at the conclusion, but who knew how he fared afterwards? Yet another of his doubts were now cleared. It turned out that He Wenzhou would have regained his nascent soul no matter what. Even if it hadn't been Lu Xinyi, it would have been someone else. The blood demon cared not whether his victim was male or female. As long as they had spiritual power, he could absorb it and transform it into He Wenzhou's own power. "This Venerable One won't lie to you," said the cultivator who had once been called the Blood Demon Elder. "This brat fell into the place of this Venerable One's seclusion during the Great Sect War. I saw his aptitudes were quite good and felt like taking a disciple, he. You mean, raising him in order to steal his body later?" The Blood Demon Elder didn't reply but instead burst into laughter. There was a vicious glint in his eyes, as if he wished he could kill Wenren he on the spot. Wenren he was pleased at his maliciousness. They exchanged a smile and Wenren he said in a carefree tone, "After the Great Sect War, this Venerable One rose to the peak of Mahayana, merely one step away from ascension. However, after learning the blood art, there are hardly any opponents left in the world to challenge this Venerable One. Without entering the sea of blood in the afterworld, there are few ways for this Venerable One to advance further. If Wenren he entered the sea of blood, Yin Hanjiang would have to follow and avoid. Boundary cultivator like Yin Hanjiang had no possibility of surviving the sea of blood. A blood cultivator's path had no bottlenecks, and one could gain power at breakneck speed by endlessly absorbing the chi of the universe and the spiritual essences of others. But the path of slaughter was different. Without an opponent to match him, his mental state would not be able to keep up with his power. It would be like giving a 3-year-old child a legendary magic weapon. Even if they had it, they couldn't wield it. With power but insufficient mental fortitude, sooner or later he would suffer chi deviation. The Blood Demon Elder right before his eyes was an example of something like that. Though Wenren he was now on the path of blood cultivation, he didn't want to become a madman with no self-control. He would continue to hone his mind and carve out a new path for himself through impossible odds. For that, he needed a worthy opponent. Thus he said, "You can relax, this Venerable One will not do anything to He Wenzhou. Raise him well in the meantime. The day you take over his body and become a god is the day that this Venerable One will kill you. Kill me? Ha 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 ha. The blood demon elder seemed to have heard some incredible joke. A mere Mahayana stage blood cultivator imagines he can kill this Venerable One? Such arrogance. Fine, this Venerable One would like to see just how you live up to such wild boasting. Wenren he could sense the fighting intent that charged the air between them, allowing him to have a small breakthrough in his mental state. After they had made their agreement, the blood demon returned to his slumber. Regaining consciousness and seeing Lu Xinyi smiling eerily at him, He Wenzhou cried out, "Release Lu Shimei. Don't worry, this Venerable One has no interest in her, nor any interest in you, Wenren," he said. Then he turned and walked out of the room. End chapter.